high in the mist-crowned Andes, where snow-capped peaks cut into the heavens and deep valleys cradled terraced fields of maize and potatoes, stood one of the most extraordinary civilizations the world has ever known, the Inca Empire Wantinsu. The land of the Four Quarters stretched for nearly 2,500 miles along the spine of South America, binding together diverse peoples and landscapes under a single, radiant sun. Yet, within a few short years in the 16th century, this mighty realm collapsed. It was not merely the fall of an empire, it was the destruction of a world. The story begins in the 1520s, when the Inca Empire reached its height under the rule of Huayna Capac. From his capital at Cusco, the navel of the world, he oversaw a vast network of roads and messengers, mighty fortresses and temples dedicated to Inti, the sun god. The Incas commanded armies of tens of thousands, and their engineers carved stonework so precise that even a blade could not slip between the joints. Yet beneath this facade of strength, storms gathered. Huayna Capac died likely of smallpox, carried silently by European explorers advancing up the continent. His death left the throne contested between his two sons, Atahualpa in the north and Huascar in the south. The succession tore Tawantinsuyo apart. Civil war ravaged the empire. Cities and families were split by loyalty, temples looted, and armies marched across the Andes in a brutal contest for power. Atahualpa eventually triumphed, capturing his brother and massacring Huascar's supporters. But the victory left the empire weakened, its unity fractured, and its spirit shaken. It was at this moment when the empire bled from within that strangers from across the sea appeared. In 1532, Francisco Pizarro, a Spanish adventurer hardened by years in the Caribbean, landed on the Peruvian coast with fewer than 200 men. They were not the first Europeans in South America, but they arrived with a mix of cunning, ambition, and ruthless opportunism that would change history. Armed with steel swords, firearms, horses, and a burning conviction of divine favor, they advanced inland toward the heart of the empire. To them, the Inca world was both a treasure chest of gold and a battlefield for glory. The encounter came in the highland town of Cajamarca. Atahualpa, flushed with victory from the civil war, commanded an army of tens of thousands camped nearby. He agreed to meet the Spaniards, confident in his supremacy. Chroniclers describe how he entered Cajamarca seated upon a litter of gold, carried by nobles, wearing a headdress of feathers and jewels that blazed in the Andean sun. Pizarro's men, trembling at the spectacle, prepared their ambush. Atahualpa was greeted by a Dominican friar, Vicente de Valverde, who handed him a Bible and urged him to accept Christianity and submit to the Spanish king. Atahualpa, bewildered by the object, tossed it aside. This act became the spark. With a signal, Pizarro's men unleashed cannon fire and the thunder of horses against the unarmed Inca nobles. The square erupted in chaos. Thousands were cut down. Atahualpa himself was seized, dragged from his golden litter, and made a prisoner of men whose numbers were a fraction of his own. The emperor of the largest empire in the Americas was now a captive. Yet even in chains, Atahualpa retained a regal command. To save himself, he offered what would become one of the most famous ransoms in history. He promised to fill a room with gold as high as a man's reach and 2 more with silver. For months, treasures flowed into Cajamarca idols from temples, ornaments from palaces, heirlooms melted down into ingots. The Spanish marveled at the rivers of precious metal, but once the ransom was collected, greed and fear outweighed promises. In 1533, after a mock trial, Atahualpa was condemned to death. He was strangled by the garrote, ending the life of the Sapa Inca, the unique king. With their emperor slain, the empire faltered. The Spaniards marched on Cusco, aided by native rivals of the Inca who sought revenge for decades of domination. In city after city, the resistance crumbled. Huasca was already dead, murdered by Atahualpa's men. Rival nobles fought for scraps of power, but Spanish steel and horses broke their armies. In November 1533, Pizarro entered Cusco, the sacred city, and found its temples stripped, its palaces desecrated, and its people bewildered. The capital of the sun had fallen, yet the empire did not die quietly. In 1536, Manco Inca, a young noble set up by the Spaniards as a puppet, escaped their control and rallied a massive rebellion. Tens of thousands of Inca warriors laid siege to Cusco, hurling stones from the surrounding hills, burning houses, and nearly driving the Spanish out. For months, the fate of the conquest hung by a thread. But Spanish reinforcements and superior weapons eventually broke the siege. The dream of restoration flickered but failed. The survivors retreated into the remote jungle stronghold of Vilcabamba, where the last Inca rulers clung to a shadow kingdom for nearly 40 years. There, amid dense forests and rushing rivers, they tried to preserve their gods, their ceremonies, and their sovereignty. But in 1572, Spanish forces crushed Vilcabamba, capturing the final Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, and executing him in Cusco's plaza. With his death, the line of the emperors ended, and the sun of Tawantinsuyu was extinguished. The aftermath was catastrophic. Entire communities were uprooted under Spanish rule. Temples were razed or rebuilt as churches. The metasystem of labor, once the backbone of imperial construction, was twisted into brutal exploitation in silver mines like Potosi. Millions of indigenous lives were consumed by disease, forced labor, and war. The empire that had commanded the high Andes for a century was reduced to fragments, its people surviving under colonial domination, and yet the Inca spirit did not vanish. Their stone cities, Machu Picchu, hidden among the clouds, Sacsayhuaman, with its colossal walls, remained as silent witnesses to their genius. Their descendants preserved fragments of language, weaving, and memory. Even today, in the Quechua hymns sung in mountain villages and in the terraces still carved into Andean slopes, the echo of Tawantinsuyu endures. The fall of the Inca Empire was not merely a military conquest. It was a collision of worlds. Steel met stone, horses thundered against foot soldiers, and foreign gods were raised above the temples of the sun. Yet beneath the weight of conquest, the resilience of the Andean people carried forward. In remembering the fall of the Inca Empire, we are reminded of how fragile even the mightiest civilizations can be when fractured within and confronted from without. But we are also reminded that memory survives into landscapes, into language, into the persistence of a people who, though conquered, were never erased. This story of tragedy, resilience, and endurance is part of the shared history of humanity, and it matters still because the lessons of power, greed, resistance, and survival echo across the centuries, shaping how we see the rise and fall of nations today. Creating this episode required weaving together chronicles from conquistadors, Andean oral traditions, and the insights of modern archaeology. If you found value in this journey into the past, consider supporting the effort to bring such history to light. By doing so, you help keep alive the voices of civilizations whose sun may have set, but whose memory continues to rise.